She was untouchable behind her mahogany bench, a millionaire judge who'd built walls of ice around her heart. Then Marcus walked into her courtroom, clutching the trembling hand of 7-year-old Lily, and everything she thought she knew about justice cracked open. He was fighting for custody with nothing but love and a minimum wage job. She held their future in her perfectly manicured hands. But when Lily's tear-stained face looked up at her with desperate hope, Judge Catherine Sterling realized she wasn't just deciding a case, she was choosing who she wanted to be. Before we dive in, make sure to hit subscribe and leave a comment. Where in the world are you watching from? The gavel fell with the sound of finality. Judge Catherine Sterling set it down with the same precision she applied to everything else in her life, measured, controlled, absolute. The defendant, a repeat offender with hollow eyes and trembling hands, was led away in shackles. Another case closed. Another life filed away in the endless machinery of justice. Catherine didn't watch him go. She never did. "Next case?" she said, her voice cutting through the courtroom like winter air. The bailiff's voice echoed. "Docket number 2247, Sterling versus Martinez. Custody dispute." Catherine's fingers stilled on her pen. She looked up from her notes, and for a moment, just a moment, something flickered across her face. But it was gone before anyone could catch it. The courtroom doors opened with a soft creak. Marcus Martinez walked in first, his shoulders rigid with nervous energy. He wore a navy blue suit that had seen better days, the kind you buy at a discount store and hope fits well enough. His dark hair was combed back, still damp from what must have been a hurried shower after his morning shift at the auto shop. Behind him, small fingers wrapped around two of his, walked Lily, 7 years old. Brown curls that caught the fluorescent light. A yellow dress that someone, probably Marcus, had ironed with careful attention to every wrinkle. She clutched a stuffed elephant that had lost most of its gray fur from too much loving. Catherine's breath caught in her throat. She gripped her pen tighter. Across the aisle, Victoria Sterling, Catherine's own sister, swept in like she owned the building. Designer heels clicked against the marble floor in perfect rhythm. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a chignon that probably cost more than Marcus made in a week. Everything about her screamed money, power, entitlement. The kind of person Catherine had become, the kind of person Catherine had always been. "Your Honor," Victoria's attorney began, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. "My client, Mrs. Victoria Sterling, seeks full custody of her daughter, Lily Marie Martinez. As you'll see in our documentation, Mr. .166, Martinez lacks the financial stability and appropriate living conditions to provide for the child's needs." Marcus's attorney, a young public defender who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else, shuffled her papers nervously. "Your Honor, Mr. Martinez is Lily's biological father and has been her primary caregiver since." "Since my client generously allowed it," Victoria's attorney interrupted. "Mrs. Sterling has recently remarried. Her new husband, Jonathan Blackwood, is a successful hedge fund manager. They can provide Lily with private schools, tutoring, extracurricular activities, a proper home." Catherine's eyes moved to Victoria. Her sister sat with perfect posture, hands folded, diamond wedding ring catching the light. She looked at Lily once, a quick, assessing glance, then returned her attention to her manicured nails. "Mr. Martinez," Catherine said, her voice steady despite the tremor she felt building in her chest, "please approach the bench." Marcus stood, his chair scraping against the floor. He squeezed Lily's hand. "I'll be right back, Mija. Just stay right here, okay?" Lily nodded, clutching her elephant tighter. At the bench, Marcus looked up at Catherine with eyes that held too much hope. She'd seen that look before. It never ended well. "Mr. Martinez, what is your current living situation?" "We have a 2-bedroom apartment on Maple Street, Your Honor. It's small, but it's clean. Lily has her own room. I painted it yellow because," his voice caught, "because that's her favorite color." Catherine's pen stilled against her notepad. "Your employment?" "I'm a mechanic at Rodriguez Auto. I work mostly days so I can pick Lily up from school. Sometimes I have to work weekends, but my neighbor Mrs. Chen watches her. Lily loves her." Mrs. Chen teaches her Spanish and helps with homework. Your income? Marcus straightened his shoulders. 32,000 a year. I know it's not much, but we manage. Lily's never gone without anything she needs. What about what she wants? Victoria's attorney called out. What about dance classes, violin lessons, college prep? Objection, the public defender said weakly. Catherine held up her hand. The courtroom fell silent. She looked down at Marcus. In the fluorescent light, she could see the exhaustion around his eyes, the small scar on his chin, the way his wedding ring he still wore. It had worn a pale band around his finger. Mr. Martinez, tell me about Lily's mother. The words fell like stones into still water. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, the hope was still there, but something else had joined it. Grief, maybe. Or resignation. Maria died 2 years ago. Cancer. She made me promise to take care of Lily, to make sure she knew she was loved. Catherine's chest tightened. She glanced at Victoria, who was checking her phone. Mrs. Sterling, Catherine said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. Please approach. Victoria sighed softly, a sound of elegant annoyance, and stood. She moved with the confidence of someone who had never been denied anything she wanted. At the bench, she smiled. It was a perfect smile, professional and cold. Kate, she said quietly, I know this is awkward, but… Your Honor, Catherine corrected. Victoria's smile didn't waver. Of course, Your Honor. I think we both know what's best for Lily. Jonathan and I can give her opportunities. A future. Look at him. She gestured toward Marcus without looking. He's a good man, I'm sure, but good intentions don't pay for Harvard. When did you last see Lily? The question hung in the air like smoke. Victoria blinked. Well, Jonathan and I have been busy with the wedding, the honeymoon, but now that we're settled… When, Mrs. Sterling? Christmas. We saw her at Christmas. 8 months ago. We've been building our life together. Now we're ready to include Lily. Catherine looked past Victoria to where Lily sat in the gallery. The little girl was whispering to her stuffed elephant, her feet dangling from the wooden pew. She looked so small in the vast courtroom, so fragile, so alone. Return to your seats, Catherine said. She watched Marcus walk back to Lily, watched him kneel down and whisper something that made her smile. Watched Victoria click back to her seat without a glance at the child she was fighting for. Catherine had built her career on being impartial. Objective, she weighed facts, not feelings. She applied law, not emotion. But sitting in her leather chair looking down at this fractured family, she felt something crack open inside her chest. The public defender was speaking now, her voice gaining strength as she talked about Marcus's devotion, about Lily's adjustment, about the importance of stability. Victoria's attorney countered with bank statements and school district rankings and opportunities. Catherine heard it all, processed it all, filed it away in the neat compartments of her mind. But her eyes kept returning to Lily. The little girl had stopped whispering to her elephant. Instead, she was staring up at Catherine with dark eyes that held too much understanding for someone so young, eyes that had seen loss. Eyes that had learned not to expect too much. Eyes that looked exactly like Catherine's had, 30 years ago, in another courtroom, much like this one. The memory hit her like a physical blow. She was 7 years old, standing in a family court while strangers decided her future. Victoria beside her, 12 and already learning to charm the adults with perfect smiles and practiced words. Catherine, younger and less polished, clutching a stuffed rabbit that would disappear somewhere in the transition between homes. She remembered the judge, an older man with kind eyes who had tried to explain things gently. She remembered the social workers with their clipboards and concerned faces. She remembered the lawyers talking about best interests and financial stability and appropriate placement. She remembered how none of them had asked what she wanted. She remembered how none of them had seen her. Your Honor? Catherine blinked. The courtroom swam back into focus. The public defender was looking at her expectantly. I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I was saying that Mr. Martinez has been Lily's consistent caregiver. He's the one who takes her to doctor's appointments, helps with homework, reads bedtime stories. He's been her father in every way that matters. Catherine nodded slowly. I understand. Are there any character witnesses? Yes, Your Honor. We'd like to call Mrs. Elena Chen. An elderly woman rose from the back of the courtroom. She moved slowly but with dignity, her silver hair pinned back with a simple clip. She wore a navy dress that looked homemade but well cared for. At the witness stand, she spoke in accented English about watching Lily grow up, about Marcus teaching her to ride a bike in the apartment complex parking lot, about the way Lily helped him fold laundry, chattering about her day at school. That little girl, Mrs. Chen said, her voice firm despite her age. She lights up when her papa comes home. Even when he's tired, even when he's worried about money, he makes time for her. He is not rich, but he is rich in love. Victoria's attorney objected to the emotional testimony, but Catherine overruled him. She needed to hear this. Mrs. Chen, in your opinion, what would be best for Lily? The old woman looked directly at Catherine, her dark eyes sharp with intelligence. Your Honor, I raised 5 children. I have 12 grandchildren. I know what love looks like. That child belongs with her father. Catherine felt something shift inside her chest, like ice beginning to thaw. The testimony continued for another hour. Financial statements were reviewed. Home study reports were read aloud. Character witnesses spoke on both sides. But Catherine found herself watching Lily. The little girl had grown restless. She was swinging her legs now, the stuffed elephant pressed against her cheek. At one point, she slipped down from the pew and walked over to Marcus. He lifted her onto his lap without interrupting his attorney's argument, settling her against his chest like it was the most natural thing in the world. Lily's eyes drifted closed. She fell asleep there, safe in her father's arms, while lawyers argued about her future. Catherine remembered falling asleep like that once, in her father's arms, before the accident. Before the courts and the custody battles and the slow dissolution of everything she'd thought was permanent, the afternoon light was beginning to slant through the tall windows when both sides rested their cases. Catherine called for a brief recess to review the materials. In her chambers, she sat surrounded by legal briefs and financial documents. The numbers were clear. Victoria and her new husband could provide material advantages that Marcus never could. Private schools, tutoring, college funds, opportunities. Catherine had built her life around such advantages. She'd parlayed her tragic childhood into motivation, her pain into purpose. She'd graduated from Harvard Law, clerked for a federal judge, built a practice that made her wealthy and respected. She'd become everything the system said a successful person should be. She'd become Victoria. The realization hit her like cold water. When had she stopped seeing the people in her courtroom as human beings? When had she started measuring worth in dollar signs and property values? When had she forgotten what it felt like to be 7 years old and powerless while adults decided your fate? A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Come in. Her clerk, David, poked his head through the door. Your Honor, the attorneys are ready for your decision. Catherine looked at the papers spread across her desk, at the bank statements showing Victoria's 7-figure account, at the home study describing Marcus's small apartment, at the psychological evaluation that praised Marcus's parenting but questioned his ability to provide long-term stability. She thought about Lily's trusting eyes, about the way she'd fallen asleep in her father's arms, about Mrs. Chen's words, "He is not rich, but he is rich in love." She thought about her own childhood, about being shuffled between relatives who saw her as a burden, about Victoria, who had learned early how to use charm and beauty to get what she wanted, about how neither of them had really been loved not the way Lily was loved. Catherine stood up and straightened her robes. Tell them I'll be right out. Back in the courtroom. She looked down at the faces turned toward her. Marcus held Lily's hand. Victoria checked her watch. The attorneys waited with practiced patience. This is a difficult case, Catherine began, her voice carrying across the silent room. The court must consider what is truly in the best interests of the minor child. She paused, looking directly at Lily. The little girl was awake now, her dark eyes wide and solemn. Mrs. Sterling can undoubtedly provide material advantages, financial security, educational opportunities, a lifestyle that many would consider preferable. Victoria's attorney smiled. However, Catherine continued, and the smile faded, the court must also consider emotional stability, consistency of care, the strength of the parent-child bond. Marcus's hand tightened around Lily's. Lily has lived with her father for the entirety of her short life. He has been her primary caregiver, her source of comfort and security. While Mrs. Sterling is the biological mother, she has had minimal contact with the child for the past 8 months. Catherine's voice grew stronger, more certain. The court finds that while financial resources are important, they cannot replace love, devotion, and consistent presence in a child's life. Mr. Martinez may not be able to provide every material advantage, but he has provided something more valuable, a home where Lily is treasured, protected, and unconditionally loved. Victoria half rose from her seat. Your Honor, surely you can't. The court awards primary custody to Mr. Martinez. The words rang out like church bells. Marcus closed his eyes, his shoulders sagging with relief. Lily looked between the adults, not fully understanding but sensing the shift in the room's energy. Mrs. Sterling will have supervised visitation rights, pending her completion of a parenting class and regular psychological evaluation to ensure her commitment to developing a meaningful relationship with her daughter. Victoria's face had gone white with rage. She leaned over to whisper something sharp to her attorney, but Catherine wasn't finished. Furthermore, the court notes that wealth without love is poverty of the worst kind. A child needs more than a trust fund. She needs someone who sees her as more than an acquisition. The gavel fell one final time. As the courtroom emptied, Catherine watched Marcus kneel down to Lily's level. He spoke to her quietly, and she nodded, her small arms wrapping around his neck. They walked out together, father and daughter, into whatever came next. Catherine sat alone at her bench, still in her robes, watching the late afternoon sun paint golden rectangles on the empty floor. For the first time in years, she had remembered what justice actually looked like. The elevator doors closed with a soft whisper, sealing Catherine in polished steel and silence. She pressed the button for the parking garage and watched the numbers descend. 43 floors of legal offices, investment firms, and consulting groups. The kind of building where power dressed in $1,000 suits and measured success in billable hours. Her reflection stared back from the mirrored walls, perfectly styled auburn hair, tailored black suit, the kind of professional armor that announced competence before she even spoke. She looked exactly like what she was, successful, untouchable, in control. So, why did her hands shake as she reached for her car keys? The parking garage smelled of concrete and expensive cars. Her Mercedes sat in its reserved spot like a silent promise of the life she'd built. Leather seats, German engineering, a price tag that represented years of 12-hour days and carefully cultivated connections. She sat behind the wheel but didn't start the engine. Instead, she thought about Lily's eyes, about the way Marcus had whispered to his daughter, his voice gentle despite the weight of what they'd been through, about Mrs. Chen's words. He is not rich, but he is rich in love. Catherine pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts. Victoria's name appeared near the bottom, accompanied by a photo from last Christmas, both sisters smiling at some charity gala, champagne glasses raised, the picture of success. When had they last talked about something that mattered? The phone rang twice before Victoria answered. Well, Victoria's voice was ice over fire. I hope you're satisfied. Victoria, don't, just don't. The sound of heels clicking on marble echoed through the phone. I'm in the lobby of Blackwood Associates right now, about to explain to my husband why his new stepdaughter will be living in some apartment instead of our penthouse. Catherine closed her eyes. She's not a trophy, Vic. She's a little girl who just lost her mother. And now she's stuck with a mechanic who can barely pay rent. Victoria's voice cracked just slightly. Do you know what I could have given her? What we could have given her? What? Money? Opportunities, Catherine. A future. Everything we never had. The words hung between them like a bridge neither wanted to cross. We had love, Catherine said quietly. Did we? Victoria's laugh was sharp as broken glass. We had chaos. We had being passed around like unwanted packages. We had wearing the same clothes until they fell apart because nobody cared enough to take us shopping. Catherine remembered. The succession of relatives who took them in out of obligation rather than love. The whispered conversations about what to do with the girls. The way Victoria had learned to charm her way into favor while Catherine had learned to make herself invisible. I was going to do better, Victoria continued, her voice softer now. I was going to give Lily everything. Stability, security, love. When? The question came out harsher than Catherine intended. When were you going to start loving her? After the honeymoon? After you got bored with being a newlywed? After it became convenient? Silence stretched across the phone line. You don't understand, Victoria said finally. I was protecting myself, getting close to her when Marcus could take her away at any time. I couldn't risk it. So instead you risked losing her completely. Catherine heard her sister take a shaky breath. I have to go, Victoria whispered. Jonathan is waiting. The line went dead. Catherine sat in the darkness of the parking garage, surrounded by the trappings of success, and wondered when she'd last felt truly happy. Her phone buzzed with a text from her assistant. Dinner reservation at Romano's confirmed for 8 p.m. Client dinner with Harrison Industries. Another networking dinner. Another evening of careful conversation and strategic positioning. Another night of being Judge Catherine Sterling, successful and untouchable. She deleted the text and drove home instead. Her penthouse apartment overlooked the city like a fortress of glass and steel. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view that real estate agents called breathtaking and charged accordingly for. Modern furniture arranged with museum precision, art that appreciated in value. Everything perfect, everything cold. Catherine poured herself a glass of wine and stood at the window, watching the city lights twinkle below. Somewhere out there, Marcus was probably helping Lily with homework at a kitchen table in their small apartment. Maybe Mrs. Chen was teaching her a new Spanish word. Maybe they were reading a bedtime story. Maybe they were happy. The wine tasted like ash in her mouth. She thought about her father. Not the idealized version she'd constructed over the years, but the real man who had read her stories and taught her to play chess and made pancakes shaped like animals on Sunday mornings. He'd been a teacher, she remembered now. Middle school math. Not wealthy, but rich in the ways that mattered. Before the drunk driver. Before the lawyers and the courts and the slow dissolution of her world, her phone rang, jarring her from the memory. Catherine? It's David. Her clerk's voice was apologetic. I'm sorry to bother you at home, but there's been a development in the Martinez case. Catherine's grip tightened on the wine glass. What kind of development? Mrs. Sterling's attorney filed an emergency appeal. They're claiming bias, conflict of interest. They want the custody decision overturned. The wine glass slipped from Catherine's fingers, shattering against the marble floor. Red wine spread like blood across the white stone. On what grounds? They're saying you have a personal relationship with the parties involved. That your decision was emotionally compromised rather than legally sound. Catherine stared at the broken glass, at the wine seeping into the expensive grout. Your Honor? Are you there? Yes, I'm here. She knelt down and began picking up the larger pieces of glass, her hands steady despite the tremor in her chest. When is the hearing? Tomorrow morning. 9 a.m. Judge Hendricks will be presiding. Judge Hendricks, a man who measured justice in precedent and procedure, who'd never met a technicality he wouldn't exploit. A man who would look at the facts and see exactly what Victoria's attorney wanted him to see. Thank you for calling, David. Catherine hung up and continued cleaning the broken glass, each piece sharp enough to cut. She thought about Marcus, probably sleeping soundly for the first time in months, believing his daughter was safe. She thought about Lily, tucked into her yellow bedroom, surrounded by the kind of love that couldn't be bought or sold. She thought about what would happen when Victoria's high-powered attorneys got their second chance. Catherine had built her career on being impartial, on following the law regardless of personal feelings, on being the kind of judge who couldn't be swayed by emotion or bias. But sitting on her perfect marble floor, surrounded by broken glass and spilled wine, she realized that sometimes the law wasn't enough. Sometimes justice required something more. The next morning arrived gray and drizzling, the kind of weather that matched Catherine's mood. She dressed with extra care, her most conservative suit, her grandmother's pearl earrings, every piece of armor she could manage. In the courthouse hallway, she found Marcus pacing outside the courtroom. He looked like he hadn't slept, his usually neat hair disheveled, his shirt wrinkled despite obvious attempts to press it. "Judge Sterling," he said when he saw her, hope and desperation warring in his voice. "They said there's another hearing." "They said—" "I know." Catherine glanced around the hallway, then guided him to a quiet alcove. "Mr. Martinez, I need you to understand something. This hearing isn't about what's best for Lily. It's about legal technicalities." Marcus's face went pale. "Are they going to take her away?" Catherine looked at this man who had fought so hard for his daughter, who had loved her completely despite having so little to offer in material terms. She thought about her own childhood, about the relatives who had provided everything except what mattered most. "Not if I can help it," she said quietly. "But you won't be the judge today." "No, but I'll be there." The courtroom was packed. Victoria sat with her attorney and her new husband, a silver-haired man in an expensive suit who looked like he'd never changed a diaper or read a bedtime story. Marcus sat with his public defender, Lily nowhere to be seen. Judge Hendricks was exactly what Catherine expected, methodical, precise, utterly unmoved by emotion. He reviewed the case files with the mechanical efficiency of a computer processing data. "The appellant argues that Judge Sterling's decision was compromised by personal bias," he began, his voice carrying no warmth. "They contend that her relationship to the biological mother created a conflict of interest that invalidated her judgment." Victoria's attorney stood, his voice smooth and confident. "Your Honor, Judge Sterling admitted in open court that she and my client are sisters. This created an obvious conflict that should have resulted in her recusal from the case." Catherine felt her chest tighten. It was true, she should have recused herself the moment she saw Victoria's name on the docket. Any other judge would have. Any other judge would have followed procedure. "Furthermore," the attorney continued, "Judge Sterling's decision was based on emotional rather than legal considerations. The evidence clearly shows that Miss Sterling can provide superior financial support, educational opportunities, and long-term stability." Marcus's attorney stood to respond, but Catherine could see the defeat in her young face. The law was clear. Personal relationships created conflicts of interest. Judges who failed to recuse themselves opened their decisions to appeal. Judge Hendricks was nodding, already forming his conclusion. Catherine rose from her seat in the gallery. "Your Honor, I request permission to address the court." Hendricks looked surprised. "Judge Sterling, you're not counsel in this matter." "No, Your Honor, but I am the judge whose decision is being challenged, and I believe I have relevant information." Hendricks frowned but gestured for her to approach. At the witness stand, Catherine felt exposed in a way she'd never experienced from the other side of the courtroom. Every eye was on her, every word would be scrutinized. "Judge Sterling," Hendricks began, "did you know that Mrs. Victoria Sterling was your sister when you agreed to hear this case?" "Yes, Your Honor." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Marcus's face went white. "And did you consider recusing yourself?" Catherine looked out at the gallery, at Marcus clutching his attorney's arm, at Victoria sitting rigid beside her husband. "I did, Your Honor, and I chose not to." "Why?" Catherine took a breath. This was the moment that would define not just this case, but who she was as a person, who she chose to be. "Because, Your Honor, I realized that my relationship to Mrs. Sterling didn't create bias in her favor. It created clarity about what she's capable of." Victoria's attorney shot to his feet. "Objection. Overruled," Hendricks said, his interest clearly piqued. "Continue, Judge Sterling. Your Honor, my sister and I were raised in the foster care system after our parents died. We were shuffled between relatives who provided for our physical needs but never gave us what we truly required: consistent love and emotional security. Catherine's voice grew stronger as she continued. Miss Sterling learned early that charm and beauty could get her what she wanted. She learned to present herself as the perfect choice, the obvious selection. But underneath that presentation, she has never learned how to truly love a child, how to put someone else's needs before her own desires. Your Honor, Victoria's attorney interrupted, this is character assassination, not legal testimony. I'm not finished, Catherine said, her voice sharp enough to cut. Mrs. Sterling abandoned her daughter for 8 months while she pursued her new marriage. She came to court seeking custody not because she loves Lily, but because she finally decided it was convenient to include a child in her perfect life. She turned to look directly at Victoria, whose composure was finally cracking. My decision wasn't biased by personal relationship, Your Honor. It was informed by personal knowledge. I know my sister. I know what she's capable of giving a child, and more importantly, what she's incapable of. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of rain against the tall windows. Mr. Martinez, on the other hand, has loved Lily consistently and completely. He's made sacrifices for her, put her needs first, created a home where she feels safe and valued. Yes, he has fewer material resources, but he has something far more valuable: the ability to love without conditions. Catherine's voice softened. I made my decision based on law, Your Honor. The law that says a child's best interests include emotional stability, consistent care, and genuine love. The law that says money cannot replace devotion. She paused, looking up at Judge Hendricks. If that constitutes bias, then I accept the consequences. But I will not apologize for seeing past financial statements to recognize what real love looks like. Judge Hendricks was quiet for a long moment. His fingers steepled as he considered her words. Judge Sterling, your testimony is unusual, but it raises important questions about the nature of bias versus informed judgment. He looked out at the courtroom, at Marcus and Victoria and all the lawyers with their carefully prepared arguments. This court finds that while Judge Sterling's failure to recuse herself was technically improper, her decision was based on sound legal reasoning and appropriate consideration of the child's best interests. Victoria's attorney started to object, but Hendricks held up his hand. Furthermore, the appellant has failed to demonstrate that they can provide the emotional stability and consistent care that the law requires. Mrs. Sterling's 8-month absence from her daughter's life speaks to a pattern of prioritizing her own interests over the child's needs. Catherine felt her knees go weak with relief. The original custody decision stands. Mr. Martinez retains primary custody of his daughter. The gavel fell like thunder. As the courtroom emptied, Catherine found herself face to face with Victoria in the hallway. Her sister's perfect composure had finally shattered, leaving behind something raw and vulnerable. You destroyed me in there, Victoria whispered. No, Catherine said quietly. I told the truth. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. She was too proud to shed. I wanted to love her, Kate. I really did. But I was so afraid. Afraid of what? Of being like them, like all those relatives who took us in and never really wanted us. I was afraid I'd mess her up the way we got messed up. Catherine felt her own walls cracking. So instead you abandoned her completely. I thought if I waited until I was ready, until I was perfect, then I could be the mother she deserved. She doesn't need perfect, Vic. She needs present. Victoria wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing her carefully applied makeup. It's too late now, isn't it? Catherine thought about Marcus teaching Lily to ride a bike, about Mrs. Chen helping with homework, about all the small, daily acts of love that built a childhood. It's too late to be her primary parent, Catherine said gently, but it's not too late to be her mother, if you want to be. Victoria nodded, unable to speak. It won't be easy, Catherine continued. You'll have to earn her trust. You'll have to show up, consistently, even when it's inconvenient, even when Jonathan has other plans, even when it's hard. I know, They stood in the courthouse hallway, two sisters who had spent decades building walls between themselves and the world, finally seeing each other clearly. "Kate?" Victoria's voice was small, uncertain. Would you help me? I don't know how to be a mother." Catherine thought about her empty penthouse, her perfectly ordered life, her career built on maintaining distance from the people whose lives she touched. She thought about Lily's trusting eyes and Marcus's gentle hands and the kind of love that couldn't be bought or planned, perfected. "Yes," she said, "I'll help you." 3 weeks later, Catherine stood outside a yellow door on Maple Street, holding a bag of groceries and questioning every decision that had led her here. The apartment building was nothing like her glass tower downtown. Paint peeled from the exterior walls, and the hallway smelled faintly of cooking spices and old carpet. But through the thin walls, she could hear laughter, a child's giggle, followed by a man's deeper chuckle. She knocked softly. The laughter stopped. Footsteps approached, and the door opened to reveal Marcus, still in his work clothes, a dish towel thrown over his shoulder. His face went through a series of expressions: surprise, confusion, wariness. "Judge Sterling." "Catherine," she corrected quietly. "May I come in?" Marcus hesitated, then stepped aside. The apartment was small but spotless, filled with the kind of warmth that had nothing to do with expensive furnishings. Crayon drawings covered the refrigerator. A jigsaw puzzle was half finished on the coffee table. Lily's yellow elephant sat on the couch like an honored guest. "Lily, we have a visitor," Marcus called. The little girl appeared from what must have been her bedroom, still in her school clothes, but with paint smudged on her fingers. When she saw Catherine, she stopped, suddenly shy. "Hi," Lily said, tucking herself against Marcus's side. "Hello, Lily." Catherine knelt down to the child's level. "I brought some things for dinner, if that's okay with your papa." Lily looked up at Marcus, who nodded slowly. "What kind of things?" Lily asked, curiosity overcoming shyness. Catherine opened the bag. "Well, I thought we might make spaghetti, and I brought ingredients for chocolate chip cookies." Lily's eyes widened. "Real chocolate chip cookies? Not the ones from the store?" "The kind you make from scratch," Catherine confirmed. "But I have to warn you, I'm not very good at cooking. I might need help." "I can help," Lily said, bouncing slightly. "I help Papa cook all the time. I'm really good at stirring." Marcus was watching this exchange with the wariness of someone who'd learned not to trust sudden kindness from powerful people. "Judge Sterling," he began, but Catherine held up her hand. "Catherine, please. And I know this is unexpected. I know you have no reason to trust me. But—" She looked around the small apartment, at the evidence of a life built on love rather than money. "I'd like to help, if you'll let me." "Help with what?" "With whatever you need. Lily's school, groceries, repairs around here, but mostly—" She paused, searching for the right words. "I'd like to be part of her life, if that's okay." Marcus studied her face for a long moment. "Why?" Catherine thought about her empty penthouse, about all the dinners she'd eaten alone while watching the city lights twinkle below. About Victoria, who was slowly learning to show up for supervised visits, awkward but trying. "Because she reminds me of someone I used to know, someone I'd forgotten about." "Who?" "Myself, before I learned to be afraid of caring too much." Lily had been listening to this adult conversation with the intense focus children reserve for things they don't quite understand but sense are important. "Are you sad?" she asked Catherine suddenly. The question hit like a physical blow. Catherine felt tears threaten for the second time in 3 weeks, more emotion than she'd allowed herself in years. "Sometimes," she admitted. Lily nodded gravely. "I get sad sometimes too, but Papa says it's okay to be sad, as long as you don't stay sad forever." Catherine looked at Marcus, who was watching his daughter with such gentle pride it made her chest ache. "Your papa is very wise," Catherine said. "I know," Lily grinned, the moment of seriousness passing. "Can we make cookies now?" The next 2 hours were unlike anything Catherine had experienced in decades. She found herself elbow deep in cookie dough, flower in her hair. Listening to Lily chatter about her teacher and her best friend Maria and the stray cat that lived behind the building, Marcus stayed watchful but gradually relaxed as he saw Catherine's genuine interest in his daughter's stories. He showed her how to roll the dough into proper-sized balls, how to space them on the cookie sheet, how to tell when they were done. "You really have never baked cookies before?" he asked as they waited for the second batch to finish. Catherine shook her head. "I grew up in foster care. After that, it was boarding school, then college, then law school. Somewhere along the way, I forgot there were things worth doing besides advancing my career." "What about when you were little? Before my parents died?" Catherine stirred the spaghetti sauce, surprised by how easily the words came. "My mother used to bake. I remember helping her make birthday cakes, standing on a chair so I could reach the counter. But after, well, none of our relatives were particularly domestic." Lily, who had been coloring at the kitchen table, looked up. "Your mama and papa died too?" "Yes, sweetheart, when I was about your age." "That's really sad." Lily considered this gravely. "Did it hurt?" "Yes, for a very long time." "But you're not sad all the time now, right?" Catherine looked at this wise little girl, at her father who had somehow raised her to have compassion for strangers, at the warm kitchen filled with the smell of cookies and tomato sauce. "No," she said quietly. "Right now, I'm not sad at all." They ate dinner at the small table, Lily chattering about her day, while Marcus served the spaghetti with careful attention to making sure everyone had enough. The conversation was easy, comfortable in a way Catherine hadn't experienced since childhood. After dinner, while Marcus washed dishes, Catherine found herself on the couch with Lily, reading from a worn copy of Charlotte's Web. "This is my favorite book," Lily confided, snuggled against Catherine's side. "Papa's read it to me like 100 times. What do you like about it?" Lily thought seriously about the question. "Charlotte saves Wilbur even though she's just a spider and he's a pig. She's little, but she's brave." Catherine felt something shift in her chest. "Sometimes the smallest people can make the biggest difference." "Yeah, like me helping Papa with cookies, or Mrs. Chen teaching me Spanish words." Lily paused. "Are you going to come back and visit us again?" The question was asked with the kind of hopeful vulnerability that only children possess. Catherine looked over at Marcus, who had stopped washing dishes to listen. "Would you like me to?" "Yeah, we could make different kinds of cookies next time. Or maybe cake." Catherine smiled, feeling something warm unfold inside her. "I'd like that very much." Later, after Lily had been tucked into bed with her yellow elephant and a good-night kiss from both adults, Catherine and Marcus sat on the small balcony overlooking the parking lot. It wasn't much of a view, but the evening air was soft, and the sounds of the neighborhood settling into night were oddly comforting. "She's incredible," Catherine said quietly. Marcus smiled, the worry lines around his eyes softening. "She is. Even after everything she's been through, losing her mama, the custody battle, she still believes the world is basically good." "How do you do it? Keep her believing that?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, watching a neighbor walk their dog across the courtyard. "I try to be the kind of person she thinks I am," he said finally. "Some days, that's harder than others." Catherine understood. "I spent so many years trying to be untouchable. I thought if I was successful enough, powerful enough, nothing could hurt me the way losing my parents hurt." "Did it work?" Catherine laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I became exactly what I thought I wanted to be. Rich, respected, independent. But I also became," she searched for the word, "empty." "What changed?" Catherine thought about that moment in the courtroom, seeing Lily's trusting eyes and remembering her own childhood, about Victoria's desperate attempt to acquire love rather than earn it, about Mrs. Chen's simple truth. "He is not rich, but he is rich in love." "You did," she said simply. "Both of you. You reminded me that love isn't a weakness to be defended against. It's the only thing that makes any of this worthwhile." Marcus studied her face in the dim light from the apartment behind them. "You know, when I first saw you in that courtroom, I was terrified." "You looked so." controlled, so far above all of us. I was, or I thought I was. But then, when you made your decision, I saw something else. I saw someone who remembered what it felt like to be powerless. Catherine nodded. I remembered being 7 years old and having my future decided by people who saw me as a problem to be solved rather than a person to be loved. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, listening to the sounds of the city settling into night. "Catherine," Marcus said quietly, "why are you really here?" The question she'd been avoiding, even to herself. "Because," she said slowly, "for the first time in 30 years, I met people who made me want to be better than I am. Not more successful, not more powerful, just better. You saved us, you know, Lily and me. Not just in court, but," he gestured toward the apartment where his daughter slept safely. "You gave us a chance to be a family. You were already a family. I just made sure the law recognized it." "Same thing." Catherine shook her head. "What you have with Lily, that's something you built, day by day, with love and patience, and showing up when it mattered. I just made one decision. One decision that changed everything." Catherine thought about that. About how one moment of choosing love over law, heart over head, had cracked open the careful walls she'd built around herself. "It changed everything for me too," she admitted. Marcus reached over and squeezed her hand gently. "Good." The next morning, Catherine woke up in her penthouse to her phone buzzing with messages. 3 missed calls from David, her clerk. 2 from her assistant. 1 from the courthouse administrator. She'd overslept. For the first time in her judicial career, she'd overslept. But instead of panic, she felt something else. A lightness, as if some weight she'd been carrying for years had finally been lifted. She called David first. "Your Honor, thank goodness. I was starting to worry. You have the Morrison hearing at 10, and the plea negotiations for the Henderson case need to be reviewed before." "David," Catherine interrupted gently, "clear my calendar for this afternoon." "Ma'am?" "I need to go shopping. I promised someone I'd learn how to make cake." There was a pause. "Shopping? For cake?" Catherine smiled, looking out at the city morning through her floor-to-ceiling windows. Somewhere out there, Marcus was probably making breakfast while Lily got ready for school. Maybe Mrs. Chen was teaching her a new Spanish word. Maybe they were happy. Maybe happiness was something worth learning. "Yes, David. For cake." "And David?" "Yes, ma'am. From now on, I want you to block out Saturday mornings. Every Saturday morning." "For what, Your Honor?" Catherine thought about small hands covered in cookie dough, about story time on a worn couch, about the way Lily's eyes lit up when she laughed. "For family," she said quietly. For the first time in years, Judge Catherine Sterling had remembered what mattered most, and for the first time in years, she was rich in all the ways that counted. 6 months later, Catherine stood in the courthouse bathroom, staring at her reflection and trying to calm the flutter of nerves in her stomach. Today was different. Today, Victoria was having her first unsupervised visit with Lily. Catherine had spent hours with her sister over the past months, teaching her things their own childhood had never provided. How to braid a little girl's hair, how to pack a lunch that said, "I love you," in peanut butter and jelly. How to listen, really listen when a 7-year-old talks about the intricate social dynamics of second grade. Victoria had been a reluctant student at first, approaching motherhood like another skill to master, another performance to perfect. But slowly, something had shifted. Catherine had watched her sister's face change the first time Lily had reached for her hand unprompted. Had seen Victoria's carefully constructed walls crack open when Lily drew her a picture labeled "My Mama Victoria" in purple crayon. Now Victoria was taking Lily to the zoo. Just the two of them. Catherine checked her watch. They should be at the elephant exhibit by now. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "How are you holding up?" She typed back. "Nervous. You?" "Same. Want to get coffee and worry together?" 20 minutes later, they sat in a small cafe near the courthouse. both nursing lattes and trying not to check their phones every 30 seconds. "She'll be fine," Marcus said, though his voice carried the same uncertainty Catherine felt. "I know. Victoria's really trying. She's different now. Because of you." Catherine shook her head. "Because of Lily. That little girl has a way of making people want to be better." Marcus smiled, the worry lines around his eyes softening. "She gets that from her mother. Maria always saw the best in people, even when they couldn't see it themselves." It was the first time he'd mentioned his late wife without pain shadowing his features. Catherine had watched him slowly heal over the past months, watched him learn to remember love without drowning in loss. "She would have liked you," he said quietly. "How do you know?" "Because you saved her daughter. Because you saw what mattered when nobody else did." He paused, stirring his coffee unnecessarily. "Because you make Lily laugh in a way she hasn't since Maria died." Catherine felt heat rise in her cheeks. Over the months, their Saturday morning visits had become the highlight of her week. Baking lessons with Lily, helping with homework, listening to stories about school friends and playground drama. And somewhere in the middle of all those domestic moments, she'd started looking forward to Marcus's quiet presence as much as Lily's bright chatter. "Marcus?" she began, then stopped. What could she say? That somewhere between learning to make pancakes and helping with art projects, she'd started to fall in love with the life they'd built? That she'd started to imagine herself as more than just a visitor in their small, warm world? Her phone rang, interrupting the moment. Victoria's name flashed on the screen. Catherine's heart stopped. "Victoria? Is everything okay?" "Kate, you need to get down here, now." "What happened? Is Lily hurt?" "No, she's just come to the zoo, the children's area. Please." The line went dead. Catherine and Marcus looked at each other for one frozen second, then both stood simultaneously. "My car's closer," Catherine said, already moving. They drove through the city in tense silence, Catherine's hands gripping the steering wheel while Marcus stared out the window. Every possible disaster played through her mind. Victoria overwhelmed by a public meltdown. Lily hurt and asking for her papa. Her sister's fragile confidence shattered by some parenting crisis she wasn't equipped to handle. The zoo was crowded with families enjoying the warm Saturday afternoon. Catherine and Marcus pushed through groups of stroller-wielding parents and sugar-high children, following signs toward the children's area. They found Victoria and Lily sitting on a bench near the petting zoo. But something was wrong. Victoria was crying, not the careful, controlled tears Catherine had seen in the courthouse, but messy, honest sobbing. Lily sat beside her, patting Victoria's arm with the kind of gentle concern that made Catherine's chest tight. "Victoria?" Catherine approached cautiously. "What happened?" Victoria looked up, her makeup streaked, her perfect composure completely abandoned. "She called me Mama," Victoria whispered. Catherine blinked. "What?" "We were looking at the goats, and this little boy was crying because he couldn't reach the feeding station. Lily went over and helped him, showed him how to hold his hand flat so the goat wouldn't nibble his fingers." Victoria's voice caught. "And when the boy's mother thanked her, Lily said, 'My mama taught me how to be gentle with scared things.'" Victoria dissolved into fresh tears. "She meant you, Kate. She was talking about you teaching her to be patient with me when I was scared of getting close. But this woman assumed she meant me, and before I could correct her, Lily just looked up at me and smiled and said, 'Right, Mama?'" Catherine sank onto the bench beside them, understanding flooding through her. "And I realized," Victoria continued, "that I've been so focused on trying to earn the right to be called Mama that I forgot to just be present, to see who she really is instead of who I wanted her to be." Lily, who had been listening to this with the serious attention she gave to all important adult conversations, tugged on Victoria's sleeve. "Mama Victoria, why are you sad? Did I do something wrong?" Victoria's face crumpled. She pulled Lily close, holding her with the kind of desperate love Catherine recognized from their own childhood, the fear of losing something precious. "No, baby, you did everything right. I'm crying because I'm happy." "Happy crying is weird," Lily observed, but she snuggled closer anyway. Marcus knelt down in front of the bench, his voice gentle. Everything okay, mija? Mama Victoria got happy, sad when I called her mama. Lily explained. I think grown-ups have really complicated feelings. We do, Marcus agreed solemnly. But that's okay. Feelings are supposed to be complicated sometimes. Catherine watched this exchange, Victoria holding Lily with trembling hands, Marcus offering quiet reassurance, Lily accepting the emotional chaos of adults with remarkable grace. This was her family, not in any legal sense, not in any way she could have planned or controlled or built through careful strategy, but in all the ways that mattered. Victoria, she said quietly, you did everything right too. Her sister looked at her through tears. I was so scared I'd mess it up, that I'd say the wrong thing or not know what to do if she got upset. But you didn't have to be perfect. You just had to be present. Victoria nodded, understanding finally settling over her features. She doesn't need me to be perfect. She needs me to be here. Yeah, Lily said, as if this was the most obvious thing in the world. That's what Papa always says. You just have to show up. Marcus smiled, ruffling his daughter's hair. When did you get so wise? I learned it from my family, Lily said simply. The words hung in the air like a blessing. Later that evening, after Victoria had taken Lily home and tucked her into bed with a story about brave little elephants, Catherine found herself back on Marcus's small balcony. But this time, the conversation felt different, charged with possibility. She's going to be okay, Marcus said, settling beside her with 2 cups of tea. Victoria, I mean. She's finally learning to let Lily love her. It took her a while to trust it was real. Can you blame her, after what you both went through? Catherine shook her head. We learned early that love was conditional, that it could be taken away if we weren't good enough, grateful enough, perfect enough. And now? Catherine thought about Lily's easy acceptance of complicated adult emotions, about Victoria's tears of joy when she finally understood she was worthy of being called Mama, about the way Marcus had created a home where love was as natural as breathing. Now I'm learning that real love doesn't have conditions, it just is. Marcus was quiet for a moment, watching the lights come on in the apartments around them. Catherine, he said finally, what are we doing? The question she'd been avoiding for months. I don't know, she admitted. 6 months ago I was a completely different person. I lived in a tower, literally and figuratively. I measured success in verdicts and bank balances. I thought love was weakness. And now? Now I know that everything I thought mattered was just noise, distraction from what's actually important. Marcus turned to face her fully. Which is? Catherine looked through the sliding glass door to where Lily's artwork covered the refrigerator, where a half-finished puzzle waited on the coffee table, where all the evidence of a life built on love rather than achievement created a warmth no amount of expensive furniture could match. This, she said simply, showing up, being present, letting yourself care about someone more than you care about protecting yourself. That's terrifying, Marcus said softly. Yes, but it's also, she searched for the word, alive. For the first time in years, I feel alive. Marcus reached for her hand, his fingers warm and calloused from years of honest work. I've been thinking, he said, about selling the auto shop. Catherine's heart stopped. What? Why? Not to stop working, but maybe to start my own place, be my own boss. Make enough that. He paused, suddenly uncertain, that maybe I could provide better for Lily, and for anyone else who might want to be part of our family. The words hung between them like a bridge neither was quite ready to cross. Marcus, Catherine said carefully. What are you asking? He was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I'm asking if you think a high-powered judge could be happy with a mechanic who lives in a small apartment and has a 7-year-old daughter who talks too much and believes in magic. Catherine felt tears threaten the good kind, the kind that came from too much happiness to contain. I think, she said slowly, that the mechanic might be surprised to learn the judge has been falling in love with that exact life for months. Marcus's smile was like sunrise after a long night. Really? Really, but I have one condition. His face grew serious. What? Don't change apartments. Don't try to provide more than you already do. What you've built here, this warmth, this love, this home, it's perfect exactly as it is. Marcus laughed, the sound rich with relief and joy. You want to downsize from a penthouse to a two-bedroom apartment? I want to upsize from a beautiful prison to a real home. He kissed her then, soft and tentative and full of promise. When they broke apart, Catherine felt like she was seeing the world in color for the first time. There's something else, Marcus said. Lily's been asking if you might want to stay for breakfast sometime, instead of just visiting. Catherine's heart did something complicated in her chest. What did you tell her? I told her that would be up to you. Through the glass door, Catherine could see into Lily's room, where the little girl slept, surrounded by stuffed animals and drawings, and all the detritus of a childhood built on security and love. Tomorrow was Sunday. She could wake up here, help make pancakes, listen to Lily's chatter about dreams and plans and the intricate world of 7-year-old concerns. She could be part of the morning routine, the comfortable chaos of family life. She could belong somewhere. I'd like that, she said quietly. I'd like that very much. Marcus squeezed her hand. Good, because I think we'd like it too. Later, as Catherine settled into the guest room that Marcus had quietly prepared for her, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. From the ice-cold judge who measured worth in dollars and power, to this moment of choosing love over everything she'd thought she wanted, her phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Thank you for teaching me how to be a mother. And thank you for showing me it's never too late to choose love. Catherine typed back. Thank you for giving me a reason to remember how. She set the phone aside and looked around the small room. It wasn't much a twin bed, a small dresser, curtains that had seen better days. Nothing like her designer penthouse with its museum-quality art and imported marble floors. But it was home in a way nowhere else had ever been. Through the thin walls, she could hear Marcus moving quietly through his nighttime routine. Could hear Lily talking softly to her stuffed elephant in the next room. Could hear the sound of a family settling into sleep. Safe and loved, and together, Judge Catherine Sterling closed her eyes and smiled. For the first time in 30 years, she was exactly where she belonged.